So my name is Jason Leaf. I work with the National Immigration Forum as a mobilizer, a BBB mobilizer in Iowa, Wisconsin, and Missouri. And we are here today with Alex Vasquez. Now, Alex, you and I have a history. You were a student of mine way back when, and now we try to work together as much as we possibly can on some things. But maybe why don't you start by just kind of saying, what you're doing right now. What is it you're doing here in Sioux Center?
Yeah, like Jason said, my name is Alex Vasquez. I lead a nonprofit and ministry called Young Life here in Sioux County. And yeah, that's kind of what I do as an occupation.
Yeah, and how long have you been doing that?
I am pretty close to 2 years now. So,
Nice.
so yeah, it's coming up.
Nice. Well, why don't we start by just having you, well, let me set the context. So part of the context of this is the Supreme Court is making a decision on DACA, a deferred action childhood arrival. The Supreme Court is deciding whether the Trump administration's trying to rescind the program is constitutional and so on. And so that decision is hopefully going to be coming out soon. And so I'm kind of curious to hear your story and kind of get your input on the Supreme Court decision that's coming up. So why don't you start by just kind of briefly telling your story?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Jason. So my story begins in Colombia, the country of Colombia. I was born there. When I was about 5 years old, my family had to leave the country because of violence. And we migrated to the United States in 2000, I believe. I was about 5 years old. And when we came here legally on temporary visas, not knowing of what the future would hold. But my parents made a decision to stay in the United States, fleeing from the violence and hoping for the American dream, hoping that there would be a way of being able to achieve that. My parents, from a very young age, told me that education and going about things the right way would be the way to earning a place here in the United States. So I remember my mom teaching me to pay for taxes at a young age and getting a job at an early age and making sure that my grades were on top. So I did that for most of my childhood. And in 2017 or 18, I believe, somewhere around there, DACA came out. And this was the first time that I would be represented in the government. And although I was given DACA, I didn't know that I didn't qualify for FAFSA or financial help from the government. So when I applied for colleges and financial aid, I wasn't able to receive help. So I ended up going to a private school education, worked year round, and it was because of DACA that I was able to get a license. I was able to get a Social Security to be represented. And so DACA in a lot of ways really laid out the foundational work that I needed to get an education. Mm-hmm. Now, because of that, I've been able to graduate from a 4-year degree or get a 4-year degree and be able to work here legally here in the United States. Mm. So that's kind of my DACA story in a sense.
Yeah. And so you kind of touched on this, but what then, how would you respond to the question, what does DACA mean to you? What is the importance of DACA for you?
Yeah, well, DACA is very important, Jason. Most of my life, I was called and really registered in the United States as an illegal alien. That was a time of fear in my life, of confusion. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what I was entitled to. There was a lot of fear. DACA gave me a representation. Now, the legal term is a authorized alien, right? So it still has a sense of degrading name to it, but at least it represents me, right? Sure. It gives me a sense of, okay, well, I don't technically belong here, but there's a sense of like, hey, we're allowing you to stay here. For me, it's hard in touchy subject just because I didn't have a choice when I was 5 years old. I didn't know the stakes. I didn't know what breaking the law meant. But what I did know is that my family sacrificed everything, and it gave me an opportunity to be here in the United States. So DACA for me is super important. It provides an opportunity for me to dream about what's next and be able to provide and contribute back to the community that I love.
Yeah. And so how are you feeling about this, the possibility of a Supreme Court decision, which is coming here soon? How are you feeling about that possibility that DACA may be kind of struck down by the Supreme Court?
It's a scary thing. You can only push it aside as much as you can, but it's still weighing on a lot of our shoulders. I know that when I first thought about it, it was a no-brainer, right? For me, in order to get DACA, you couldn't get in trouble. You had to have a whole bunch of requirements. You had to show that you're involved in the community, in school, and there's a bunch of legal fees. You had to put money into this. So for me, it was like the top of the top, receive DACA. So for me, it was no-brainer. The United States is allowing wonderful and achieving people in the United States that are striving for jobs, that are striving for education and doing a lot of good things. So for me, it was like, why wouldn't they allow these students and people to have a pathway to citizenship? Now, getting more educated on it, I do understand that there was laws that were broken, and as far as my family goes, but I would really love to see something, a reconciliation, a process of, like, even if we have to have a fee or a pathway to it, but being in the standstill and unknowing like what comes next, it is tough because this is the country that I know. Colombia is a country that my parents grew up in, but I have no recollection or I have no understanding of what living in the country of Colombia looks like or what it feels like. So this is all I know.
Yeah. So what is your hope? Either the Supreme Court will come back and say, no, we're going to keep DACA, or they're going to strike it down and push it back to, the Congress to try to do something. What do you see as the best possible outcome?
Yeah, well, the best possible outcome and what I'm hoping for is a pathway to citizenship. I think that's the dream that everyone has. That there has to be a sense of immigration reform, and I think this is the best way to start. A lot of these people have technically earned their way to be working citizens here. So creating a pathway for that would be, in my opinion, the best. But it is also a very scary thing that they would just shut down DACA, the one thing that is representing me here.
Yeah.
So I think creating a pathway to citizenship, however that looks like, I believe is the best way towards that.
And to piggyback off that a little bit, do you get a sense of people in the immigrant community who have DACA or people that is there a lot of palpable kind of anxiety about what might possibly happen?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of colleagues of mine that actually, even in ministry that I work with, that make up quite a bit of the Hispanic population within our ministry that have DACA. This would not just only be a heavy blow for us and our families, but for our organizations and ministries and companies. It is, you don't know what's coming next.
Yeah.
So it is something that weighs on our head, and it's something that we're praying about a lot.
Okay. What would you say to somebody who really doesn't understand what's at stake here? And we're talking about citizens of the U.S. who maybe haven't really educated themselves on the issue, and so they're just kind of sitting back going, well, wait a minute, I don't quite understand. What would be one thing you would want to communicate?
Well, Jason, I think some people believe that a lot of these topics are black and white. And I believe the people who say and believe these things are people who are not experiencing it. They don't live and they don't breathe. They don't know people who are going through this, you know. So when I talk to a lot of my friends that have no idea of what DACA is, and they understand my story, they learn that there's a possibility that I might become illegal here in the next couple months. Something starts to change in their mind. And what I would love people to know is that there's a lot of hardworking people that would want a chance, that would want an opportunity to contribute. That's it. To walk alongside and to be a part of the community, to be a part of what's going on. And it's not so black and white, because we've worked our tails off. And in my story, I've been living here for 20 plus years. And you know, a lot of the people who I've grown up with, the people who I've, you know, stood next to and done the Pledge of Allegiance, and you know, my friends that, you know, that had done my taxes for me, or I helped them with their taxes. We are doing the same thing, and this is all I know. So for them to understand that someone like me who hasn't gotten in trouble, has done everything by the books, and has done everything possible, could be looking at my whole life changing, and my whole family as a whole would be devastated, and our whole life would change if I would then become illegal. So there's a lot at stake. Personally, my family, the ministry that I work for, the company, our community, there's a lot at stake. And I would just love for people to ask and find out, you know, how would this affect them, and what it would look like if they were in my shoes.
No, that's good. That's good. So kind of a last question here that maybe moves away from DACA, but during this kind of COVID-19 pandemic, what kind of issues or fears or concerns have you run across within the community, within the immigrant community, within those who, you know, are citizens, with those maybe who are undocumented? Are there particular fears that they have?
Jason, as an immigrant, there's already fear. You know, you're already living in fear. And with this COVID-19, there's an added layer of fear, of uncertainty, of unknowing what comes next, and not knowing what you're able to receive, right? There's a lot of families that I've been working with, and people who I know are fearful of just telling someone that they need help, not knowing exactly how to go about asking for help. You know, there's a language barriers for some of the families where, you know, school is sending out emails, and parents have no idea what, you know, is in store for the kids. As far as food goes, there's families that usually would come into offices, you know, and say, hey, we need help with groceries, and not knowing what phone, like where to call to ask for help. So there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of fear. And where, as in, like, one of us, we could go on Facebook or look on the internet, you know, and find out what exactly is going on. Some of those things are not something that is accessible to some of the families that I'm working with. So it's been kind of a struggle to kind of, you know, first try to get in touch with them, right? Because, you know, I could be, you know, jumping on Zoom with you right now, you know, and doing that with a family that, it's just, this is not the most accessible to all families that we're wanting to work with.
Right. No, that's a great perspective. I think, you know, everybody has been totally disrupted by this COVID thing, but from what I've experienced, it seems to be making those who are already vulnerable even more vulnerable because of some of the very things that you brought up. Well, Alex, thank you so much for taking the time to talk about these issues, these important issues. It's been great to work with you, and hopefully we can kind of keep working together. But I wish you, you know, God's blessing during this COVID time. I hope you can stay healthy, and we'll see what happens with the Supreme Court.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Jason.
All right, thanks. See ya.
Thank you.